Tell me about the World War II stuff you saw in Belgium.
It was the Great War.
The Great War, okay.
World War I.
I stood in Flanders Field near Ypres and Passchendaele. And it's about a 25 square kilometer. Just think, that's not much. 25 square kilometer patch of ground in Belgium where there were 600,000 casualties.
Dang.
Ooh.
It's unthinkable. Where the ancient world met militarized or industrialized warfare, with horses initially, with chariots almost, wagons, and machine guns.
Yeah.
And then eventually tanks. And
they just chewed through people.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really, there's a sacredness to it. I went to a cemetery that's primarily Allied forces, but UK, and there were 12,000 buried, and 8,300 were unidentified.
My God.
In that.
So of the 600,000, that would be both sides, casualties from both sides?
I think so, yes. Yeah. I didn't get to go, but there's a German cemetery where there's 40,000 buried.
My goodness.
There in Belgium. Yeah, just unbelievable cost of violence.
And I'm not as big on World War II history as I am World War I. What's history tell us is like the impetus of that violence? Like, where does that?
Well, what's amazing is where I think we want to go today is World War I starts with the assassination in Austria of Franz Ferdinand. Was an assassination. That
was
led
he?
to World
What
War
did they call those guys? The not czars. Were they?
I'm kind of at a loss, but he was a
Kaiser. What's it? The Kaiser.
Yeah, in Germany for sure.
Yeah, the Kaiser.
Kaiser.
Yeah.
But Franz Ferdinand, I think, was a prince.
Kaiser bun.
The Kaiser bun.
Yeah, his assassination led to accusations as to who did it. And Russia thought this, and Germany supported this, and
But he was Austrian, the gentleman
Yes.
who was assassinated.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And that was kind of history says that's the impetus.
Yep, that's the beginning.
Behind
tensions
World War
were there
I.
already, and movement and posturing a bit, but then that assassination, we still don't know who really ultimately was responsible for it.
Yeah.
Could have been an inside job. There's some pretty good data on that, but then it may have actually been the people that were blamed.
So in talking about political, I think the subject we want to talk about today is political violence. And you can back all the way back up to the Revolutionary War, shot heard around the world. We still don't know who that is.
No.
So that's kind of interesting.
The British, of course.
It was not the British.
My great-great-great-great-grandfather told me.
He
was there.
He was there.
Yeah, it's passed down secret knowledge.
Yeah. So political violence, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's something that is being talked about a lot today, whether you watch the news, listen to a podcast, listen to radio. Everybody has some concerns. But I think when we were prepping for this, one of the things that we just talked about is that it's actually historically political violence has been pretty normal. I mean, it's
not pretty normal. I mean, it is just.
It's been the way of the world.
Yeah, history is just, that's the way it is.
Yeah. And
It's
just
a
for
reality.
talking points, we're not justifying it. We're just talking about it right now. And if you're looking at it objectively, it's been ongoing for centuries. Paul, what was the one you were talking about where somebody got thrown out of a window?
Oh, yeah. Well, the 30 Years' War, which would have been kind of like 100 years past the Reformation, the beginning of the Reformation, and Luther, the infighting between Protestants and Catholics kind of came to a head in Prague when these Protestant leaders just chunked a few priests out the window.
Yeah.
It started a war.
People who are supposed to believe in not killing.
Nonviolence.
It's so funny. Yeah, nonviolence. But violence has, and that, really redefined the landscape, the political landscape, the geopolitical landscape of Europe based upon religion and political power. But that's been time immemorial, right? That we've been redefining boundaries and histories and all of that through violence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a reality.
I mean, even talking about the Revolutionary War, I mean, you had the Continentals that were living here. I mean, immigrated from Europe, trying to establish, a new lifestyle here. They felt like they were being oppressed where they had been promised freedom. And again, for me, I take history a little bit tongue in cheek or as a grain of salt almost, because everybody knows that the victors are the ones that write the history books. So, and it depends on what you read, how wide you read. Do you only read American history, or do you take time to read their version of it as well? But at least the way we're taught in school, is that we were being oppressed, whether it was the tea tax, the whiskey tax, all this stuff that was, you want to mess with somebody, start taxing our whiskey, and we'll start throwing some haymakers, right? But, so you had the Continental Army, come to the British, and they're standing in this field in Lexington and Concord, and somebody fires a shot. And just like what you're saying about, the British, just like the assassination. I mean, it may seem like a small thing in the moment, but when you look back through it, you're like, oh man, that was like what the dynamite was there. It was all that dry powder. Was already packed.
That's World War I for sure.
Yeah, and then the violence almost is like it's just a match, and then it's bam.
But the violence is kind of like the last effort. Like discourse failed basically, right? Just like the 30 Years' War, they had 100 years of trying to navigate this different ideologies. 100 years, and then one event like that changes it, and it becomes then escalates to like full-on violence.
And were you going to say something? I don't want to cut your thought off.
Well, it's just like if you look at it like a wave on a graph, right? That's how violence has been in human history and we've been fortunately, at least in the West, we've been in a relatively long trough of more peace. Yes, have there been little spikes of violence or assassination, but in a late stage democracy, the concern is are we looking at a trend upward or a spike to where it becomes more normative and common again? And I think when you're in it, what can we do to keep the trough, to keep the lack of political violence consistent?
I think when I listen to news commentary, one of the things that I feel is missing is that it's almost like they are surprised that there is political violence.
Yeah.
And I think that's problematic because we don't want to normalize it, but what they're not doing is reaching back to say, look, we have had a history of let's just talk about the United States. The United States have had a history of political violence. Just Google political assassinations in the United States. I mean, there's way more than what you think on there. It's not just JFK and Abraham Lincoln. That's what gets talked about. But there is a litany of judges, senators, governors, just even local
assassination
people.
Attempts too.
Yeah, and that doesn't include the attempts. So I feel like it doesn't get reached back to be like, this is how easy, this is how normative it can be to where we can be like, okay, what is it going to take for us to break that and not have that happen again? That's a little bit of the concern that I have is I'm surprised that we're here. I just feel like you didn't read history to have that aspect.
America's unique in that, yes, it's going on and has gone on in our own history. But the system of government is so profound and breakthrough in human history to help us navigate that peacefully.
Yeah.
To have voices heard, to have representation, no taxation without representation, right? All of that, to be able to bring our ideas to a unifying principle. But the danger in any late stage democracy such as Rome or Greece is that violence gets an uptick because those who were successful in the democracy, and we're talking about over generations, have lost the realization of what it costs to sustain such a democracy.
Yeah.
So they just got all the benefits from those who put in before them, but then they don't have the wherewithal or the responsibility to do what it takes to keep that thing running healthy.
Yeah.
And I fear that America may be in such a place.
All right, so where I was going to go, and we didn't prep with this, so this is just kind of throwing you guys a curveball, but it's just in my mind right now. I just want to delineate political violence and war
It's a good distinction.
Is there a distinction in that? So let's just talk about 9/11 for a second. We have terrorists fly planes into the Twin Towers, kill over 2,000 Americans. On the surface level, it seems like we haven't done anything to instigate that, other than they don't like us and we don't know we don't like them, but at the time we don't like them, right? So at the time, then President George Bush responds heavily, and it is supported by, there's no division on that. Everybody was like, let's go. You could even be as anti-violent as possible, and most people were like, let's go. But if you think back about that war, we did pretty good at the very beginning because we were chasing the Taliban, the guys who had got us. But then somehow that spirals into, we end up in Iraq, and it ends up into what Trump today calls these forever wars. So I just want to use that example. Was that retaliation? Can we tie that to political violence? Even if we have to reach back, because we think about 9/11 as 9/11, but what got us there? Was there anything that was the match that that lit, whether it was Russia being in Afghanistan, was there something missing there that lit that, or was that just, hey, this was?
I think it's a separate category. It's a little easier to delineate, what are the causation, and it's easier to respond. That's why you have a little more unity. Political violence, I think, comes when people feel unheard. They're not their side, or they feel unheard. There's in their mind, there's tyranny. There's repression, and so they're not being heard. And so because they're not being heard, or they don't feel like they have a voice, well, then I'm going to have one, right? And so almost all revolutions start with the crazies. The people that are out on the very edge of things. It's the brown shirts and Hitler. It's the radical people that take on this ideology and they choose violence, And so it starts there. I mean, Samuel Adams, is a big figure in the Revolutionary War because he could be radicalized. Others were trying to balance and keep the discourse going. He's like, no, we're gonna do something about this, right? So the violence, I think, starts with being unheard, right? So that's how you have these polarities, right, on different ideologies. One is screaming one thing, one's screaming the other, and the people on the far edge of those are the ones then that have the potential to go violent, and that escalates.
That's a good thought, and I guess the way that I would say it is every war is political. There's no war that's ever been fought that wasn't political. But when I think of political violence in this modern context, it would be domestic. But again, we can't argue that every war isn't political. So is that political violence? Well, yeah, I guess in a meta sense for sure. But when we say the phrase political violence, domestic violence, to either being in response to someone's point of view that you don't agree with, or to somehow move or shape power. Using violence to do so, which is as anti-democratic a process, at least domestically or internally, in a nation such as ours. Yeah, that's not how it should be done. The whole point of democracy is to avoid that, and let the people be heard.
Well, what about like the war of words? Sorry,
no, go ahead.
Like a war of words get ugly too. It kind of like goes over the line of decorum. And you're not talking about subjects now, you're just mudslinging. And so there's some of that rhetoric, I think, that is a precursor to actual violence.
Well, it probably is.
Yeah, so then that's kind of where I was going to jump into that is, when we're saying violence, are we only talking about when bullets or hands fly?
Physical violence, yeah.
Or is that also verbal? Because verbal can be violent. I mean, there is
screaming in somebody's
there
face
is
while
a
you're
thing
holding
as
a sign,
Well, I mean, there is a thing as verbal abuse and hate speech, and I mean, there is a and we're going to get into this in the next segment about like how do we say, okay, we're better than that. Like that's where we want to get. But to your point, Paul, about the people who are not heard, when you said that, there was situations that come to mind. Martin Luther King and the fight that he had, and he was always pushing nonviolence. Like, the violence was always being imposed on him, whether it was from the police, white supremacists. Those things were always being imposed on him, and his crew would always not respond with violence, right? And then, like, some of the latest shootings that we've had have been from transgender people or people who are pro-transgender, that they're also it's fair to say that they are a marginalized on the fringe. That's not an insult. I'm just saying they're a smaller, they're a minority for sure. And it seems like that it's went from, hey, hear me, in pride parades and different things, to be like, okay, if you can't hear me, try to catch this bullet and see how that works out for you. So I think there's two categories there, two examples that we have of one that's like, all right, well, this one kind of seems like Martin Luther King had a huge impact. I mean, nobody talks about civil rights without, he is the king of civil rights and getting things moved. And that's largely one of the reasons Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, was because of his attachment, to what was going on there. So that's kind of where I'm getting at, is where do we move from a spirit of Martin Luther King that's like, okay, we're going to do this, to another spirit that's like, well, okay, I'm not getting what I want, so I'm just going to pick up this gun and move the needle myself. How do we keep from escalating into that violence?
Well, there's always a form. All adult maturity has to do with regulation, self-regulating. You regulate your emotions, you regulate your ideas, you regulate your responses. And I don't think any conversation like this can't have some aspect of that. It's like, are we still, as human beings, flourishing, growing into such degree to where we regulate well? Like, there's things I get really upset with. When my team loses, the thought might go through my mind, take the coffee table and throw it into the LED. But I don't.
You're the guy who, when his Super Bowl team loses, your TV is no more, because after you punched it, you just ripped it off the wall.
Right. So there's a bit of, okay, that thought or impulse goes through your mind, but you regulate. Why? Because number one, I don't want my family to see that. I don't want to buy a new TV. Number three, I didn't get to number two. I just went number one. Yeah. Number three is, it's not worth it. It's not that important. And now some things can be important. I'm just saying it's not important for that response to be me lacking regulation.
So then, is there ever a scenario where violence, because in kind of this first half, we're trying to establish that it is normative. We're going to move into, is it ever justified? But I want to just stay into this normative historical piece for just a second. Has there been violence that was justified? Whether it's it's violent when you put somebody in an electric chair.
Yeah.
That's where my mind went.
It's a
deterrent, right?
Yeah, it doesn't get much more violent than that. We're seeing violence with immigration right now. That's what's startling people. Is it's like, oh my God, these guys have mask, kind of looks like a mask on, and they're straight militaried up, and it's like, you get this feeling like they're snatching people, out. So there's a lot of connotation to things that went on in Germany, where we're at today, in World War II, things that are frightening. So is in any scenario, whether it's us retaliating for what happened on 9/11, is there ever justification for violence?
Such a good question, and it's worth one more caveat. That in a late stage democracy, a very successful society where life's gotten a lot easier. I'm not saying it's easy for everyone, but if we were to look back over 500 years, 1,000, I would say life's a lot easier for even the lowest on the economic. It's still relatively easier compared to what life was like 1,000 years ago. Okay, so that changes the definition of harm.
Okay,
and so there are people who feel harm if you disagree with them. But that's not harm. So when we're talking violence, it's like, what is harm? And so I don't think a show of force from our civilian government at times when it's needed, like in a riot situation or whatever, let people speak, free speech to the core. But if people are starting to be hurt, and you need to regulate, a show of force isn't
regulators
harm.
Roll out.
Right. So I just think it's worth noting is that we've gotten incredibly sensitive in late stage democracies that if you disagree with me or a pundit is saying something you don't like, that you feel or think that's harming you.
Yeah.
That is not harm.
Yeah. So I feel like we're kind of pulling the curtain back just a little bit or moving into, okay, there is a thing of violence. When you watch an MMA match,
that's
UFC,
violent.
That's violent.
Yeah.
Right.
That's violent. Yeah. It's physical. Go ahead.
But they touch gloves, and that touching gloves is
I want to beat your face in.
But it's also an agreement.
Yeah, I know you want to beat mine in.
I know
Let's see who can.
We're on the same page here.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to physically harm me.
Yes.
But you're delineating the harm as in I'm not inviting you to do this to me. Like this is not okay.
Yeah.
And we've even talked about that in some of the like even in not going off this trail, but even in a workplace setting or a coach or a leadership where it can be verbally harmful if you don't have permission and you're just Jimmy Superfly Snuka off the top ropes verbally with how you're doing that.
Right.
Okay, so let's say in a outside of that, we're saying there is some level of violence or actual harm that is acceptable or justified.
That's tough.
It's a tough one.
There's whole communities that are nonviolent communities. Like they take a vow to be nonviolent. They won't sign up for a military. They wouldn't sign up for any kind of violence.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't answer this without saying my personal feelings. So I follow Jesus, who is the centerpiece of nonviolent resistance. He inspires Gandhi. Gandhi is a Hindu who wants to take Jesus so seriously that he leads a revolution of absolute nonviolent strength. So I just think it's worth noting that for me, at least as a Jesus follower, that for me to use violence, and this is Royce's decisions, I believe in self-defense. I don't see that as trigger happy, that I'm looking for you to do something so I can defend myself, which would be harming you. Sometimes it comes off that way. No, it would be the utter last defense, option for me, but to protect my family. But I do believe in that. So there's an example of where to protect you and yours, would need to be violent. So there's a reason there. I think it's legitimate, but I don't think it should be sought out. It should be the last possible thing.
Good.
And then I got to throw out tyrants in that.
Yeah.
But for a person, I'm not talking about entire governments or society, but as for a person, I want to exhaust every single possible measure, and I prefer to die for what I believe. I don't kill for it. And there's a big difference there.
You bring up, I think, a core idea, which is, one way to change the landscape of things is violence. It works.
It works.
And it produces more violence. We talked about that. But maybe the other way, and you talked about Jesus, is suffering. I mean, you think of MLK, who took his cues from Gandhi, who took his cues from Jesus, goes out.
Tons of suffering.
Right. And so they present their case like, hey, this is injustice. And then now they suffer for it, right? They go to jail, they get beaten, they get
ultimately assassinated.
And what happens is the goodness from
wins.
Right? The community, basically, excited. Because the community rises up and says, no more of that. You know what I mean? We're not doing that anymore. And so the hippie movement, in some ways, collaborated with this nonviolent approach. So, I mean, violence can work, but would you call that love, suffering? I don't know what you call that.
I think it's hard to have this conversation because Jesus innovated and brought forth a third path option in a polarized world. That's where it's always going to go. But the hardest path of paths, you want to talk about strength, is I hate to call it a middle path. Let's just call it third path, because middle can be misleading. It's not just you're in between the two extremes, but it's another way entirely.
Yeah, there is another way.
There is another way,
the way.
But only the strongest of the strong will take it. But it's also available to the weak. And what was it, Gandhi's quote? He said, the weak can still take it and not become weaker because they did.
Yeah.
That's the kind of path we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's soul force. That's the way I would describe it. And it's
people didn't
chief regulation of self.
People didn't understand Jesus. They assumed that his kingdom was something that was a kind of an overt kingdom that would, be an answer to the Roman oppression, right, and tyranny, and that's what they were looking for.
I mean, even his inner circle was looking for that for the majority of the time.
He died with the assumption, or the case that was brought against him that led to his crucifixion was a case that was a political case, right? He's going to tear down the temple. He is going to overthrow the government. He says he's the king. So they used their context to assume that he was violating their way. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's interesting.
So let me ask you this then: if we apply this to first principles, I'm going to give you two categories. Is this a better, best, or right, wrong? Because there's stories,
violence over suffering. You mean?
Well, there's stories throughout even the entire Old Testament, which it's a book that we hold to, that we believe a lot from, where, like, what about what was the brothers, their sister was raped.
Deborah.
And was it Deborah or Dinah, or can't remember her name, where they raped the sister, and they were like, oh, okay, well, we're going to now marry your wives, and they had to be circumcised. So it says they waited till they were very sore. I mean, that's what the text says.
Just circumcised.
Yeah. And then they just went in and killed them all.
They slaughtered them.
And there's no condemnation of that in the book anywhere. So, when we're talking about violence as a subject, I think, it might be multidimensional in terms of right, wrong versus better, best.
Yeah.
Because if somebody goes to harm my kids, right, wrong for me is out the window. I mean, it's just out the window. Now, maybe the better best would be like, maybe I can negotiate this down a little bit, and because how am I helping them if I kill the person and end up in jail?
Right.
Well, let's go with the Phillies Karen story.
Okay. All right.
So Phillies Karen, right? There's a ball hit. I guess it was a home run. All these people converge on the ball. Some guy walks away with it, and he's like, yeah, I got it, just like typical.
He comes a few seats down. That's her contention, which is ridiculous.
Right. But then he comes down, walks back to his son and hands it to his, 9-year-old kid. And the kid's like ecstatic, right?
Over the moon.
And he's like, I'm the dad.
I got a ball. And then the dad's like,
here comes Phillies Karen over and just cusses him out. And he's like, what,
Yeah.
And then
demanding that it's hers and that he took it from her.
And so he's like, well, whatever. He takes the ball out of his kid's glove and hands it to her, and is like, and she marches off like she did something, and then starts flipping off the crowd.
He's
people are saying, people in the crowd start kind of jeering her and stuff. She's flipping them off. Well, they banned her from the deal. Everybody on social media rises up. I mean, there's a cartoon, like one of those little caricatures, like how they have the G.I. Joe in a package, Phillies Karen with the
a little toy, little
little wig you could wear, or the Halloween spirit costume for Halloween.
Who are you going to be for Halloween, Phillies Karen?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, there was a guy who what he probably felt like doing was just, haymaker.
Yeah.
Like send her down a few pews, a few seats. And everybody probably would have cheered that too, But he didn't. He just okay, whatever,
Yeah.
And so then here comes, the Phillies organization brought him a whole package full of stuff and, merch and And then all over America it flies. So I mean, I'm just saying sometimes suffering and nonviolence, actually the goodness of it. There's some suffering.
That's right.
There's a loss.
I mean, he could have been justified in just verbally retaliating. Didn't have to touch her or do anything. He could have just been blankety blank. Carrying this, carrying that. I'm not going to give you this ball. But he took the high road, and it ended up paying off for him and his son pretty handsomely.
So you take that little story and then you apply it over to the MLKs or Jesus or Gandhi, and you look how that suffering is a longer path. It's a lower road. So 300 years later, Christianity is the predominant way of thinking, and religion takes 300 years to change an atmosphere. That violence couldn't change prior to that, and hasn't changed since.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear on what I'm not saying that we weren't justified in our retaliation for 9/11, but the end result ended up in a forever war that ended up in another catastrophe at Bagram Air Force Base when we were trying to get out, and we left a bunch of people stranded.
Lots of equipment.
Who had helped us, and billions of dollars of equipment that basically just re-armored the Taliban.
Right. All kinds of collateral stuff.
They're more armored now than they were when we started it. And if we just reach back into their war, what created the Taliban and Osama bin Laden was the war with Russia. And we were actually providing them arms at that time.
Yeah, supporting them.
So just kind of where I want to land the plane on that is that there may be things that seem justified and are justified in the moment. But what we're getting to here is that violence, if you choose that option, even if it's justified, in some way, shape, or form, it begets or creates another form of violence.
How many more radicalized people are there because of our response to 9/11?
Correct. That's my fear for Israel right now and what's going on in Gaza.
Yep.
I mean, no matter what the truth is, and all those kids, the children and teenagers that's being impacted by that, what's being put into them? What level of hate is being put into them right now? For me, the future of that situation is pretty frightening.
10 times worse.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of come back to justified violence, or I don't want to call it holy war. That's very misleading. The one place where I'm pro nonviolence, I am pro self-regulation. I also want to say that understanding what kind of strength, I think, and maybe we'll come back to this, but I just want to put a plug in here. This isn't passivity. Nonviolent at the third path is not passivity. It's not letting tyrants run over you. It's resisting them without becoming them in the process. So that said, Hitler is the biggest stump for me when it comes to something had to be done. Like every time I roll around that whole conflict in World War II.
You're saying something had to be done
violently. Like war, had to be
to
fought,
stop him.
To stop. So tyrants, certain tyrants.
Let's just real quick. Let me back up just a little bit. Post World War I, Germany went through incredible financial
reparations.
Totally,
World War.
Totally understood.
Whatever Americans know as a depression is nothing.
Nothing. It was
compared
brutal.
to what,
it
went on for years.
Yes, completely understood.
And so he almost had his meteoric rise really came from the rescuer.
Yep.
To get them out of that.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure we, from a German perspective, not just hey, this is how we see it because we had to fight the crazies, but they were enamored with him.
Of course.
For sure.
But where it went, if we didn't stop him, and I totally understand and agree with what led to it. World War I pretty much gave him a platform. The response to Germany, or the way they were treated at the end of it, there could have been some mercy shown in the sense of it. it might have offset the rise of
like
Hitler.
by the rest of the world, especially
just some mercy,
because
a little bit.
we retracted into isolationism.
Yep, we just went back to the other side of the pond.
Unwilling to help.
Yep.
So I mean, think about the cost of American lives, dollars, the whole deal.
And France was pissed. I mean, Germany invaded them, from World War One. They were pissed, furious.
Yeah.
But what was leveraged against Germany could have had a little more compassion on the humanity that was going to be impacted.
Yeah.
But
not just generals and soldiers.
If Hitler had stopped with nation building, like his own nation, bringing pride back to the German people.
Exactly. A lot of decisions
economic rise and all of the good that was coming. I mean, there was good that was happening in the nation.
Right.
If he could have stopped there and then not go up, make an enemy out of the Jews and make an enemy out of everybody on all fronts.
Start land grabbing.
Just like, what was he, he was out to prove something else.
So I just want to make sure you land your point, Royce, that you're saying when you said something had to be done.
Yeah, I'm just talking about
something had to be done to stop him.
Not his rise, but his towards his end, or where he's like, call him prime Hitler, where he's, what I'm saying, where people are going to concentration camps, countries are being occupied, all of that. He's the type of personality, and I think most people who study history, you're not going to appease him. The scene that had Winston Churchill, I'm trying to remember the movie that had one of my favorite actors, but he's like, they were talking about appeasement, right? And he's like, you can't appease a lion when your head is in his mouth,
Yeah.
And that was the reality. And all I'll say is when I look over it all, it's probably the biggest paradox for me. And like, I don't know how you would handle that with nonviolence. I mean, meaning something needed to be done because the evil that was going to spread at that stage. We're not talking about his rise or what Germany needed in the early days, but where he was.
Are we there with how Putin is kind of playing around the edges of his borders?
There's potential. I mean, with the way it looks, but obviously Hitler had gone much further than any leader has ever gone since that.
Well, he had conquered all of Europe except UK and Ireland. So.
Yeah. And what was happening, that there needed to be a response. And I don't know how you respond to that without the Allied forces fighting and stopping that. I only use that just because that required violence to do the right thing.
It's interesting.
And I acknowledge that.
Even people inside of his camp understood that he needed to be stopped.
Yeah. Exactly.
Assassination attempts.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes evil gets to such a degree that it does require a response, but I don't think that's something we should be always trigger happy about.
Right. So, I mean, even to that point, Paul, where you're saying, I was going to mention Dietrich Bonhoeffer. We've all read him. I mean, one of the just treasures of,
brilliant
the
theologian.
20th century. And he ended up getting to the point where he was involved in multiple assassination attempts.
A
on
theologian,
Hitler.
a pastor.
Yeah. And that book it's like Martyr, Pastor, Assassin, Spy, something like that. It's a great book. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I mean, and then tragically, he was killed after the war was over.
Or days
terrible.
before. Or
no,
something.
it had already been signed, and Hitler had put the message out that anybody who had been was in prison with anything to do with assassination attempts or whatever were to be killed for sure, not let go. And they brought all those guys out there and shot them. But I mean, to your point, something had to be done. And it's almost like there's nothing else we can. And I think that's kind of what I'm saying about my kids. If you push me in a corner,
exactly,
and I feel like you give me zero,
that was global self-defense.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. What is that self-defense? I'm going to defend myself.
Yeah.
And if that means your end, that's what I'm going to try to do.
Right, because that's all that's left to us to stop evil.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the guy recently on the subway, that been let out of prison, 14 counts against him. I don't remember all what it was. It was like, and then, surprise, he commits another violent act.
Yeah.
On a train. You know what I mean? Like where, there has to be some deterrent for that kind of thing. I don't know how you avoid that.
Yeah. But let's talking about political violence, I want to segue into, how do put the stop to it? And I think what's most fresh in our minds is, you've had Democratic politicians in Minnesota who have been assassinated. Is it Charlie Kirk?
Mm-hmm.
You have that assassination, the attempt on 2 attempts on Trump. On President Trump, Nancy Pelosi's husband attacked with a hammer. So it's not just the right or the left. It's people taking it on themselves to inflict harm, as you were talking about, on people that they disagree with. So just let's spend the next few minutes on what practices need to be coming to the do we believe need to be coming to the forefront to just be like, okay, how do we return to discourse? How do we not fan the flames? Because I feel like you hear politicians say right now, we want to tone down, like the governor of Utah after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He kind of called for, we've got to tone down the rhetoric. But that's clearly not being enough, because they started saying that even after Trump's attempted assassination, tone down the rhetoric, tone down the rhetoric. That's not, so we're a year, getting close to a year past that. And we are a year past it, and we're still calling for toning it down, and the violence hasn't stopped. It might have even upticked a little bit.
Well, we cannot ignore. I would just say, let me answer it. Maybe just fast media a little bit, and take a day and don't look at
fast as in like
fast, deny, turn away from,
like you would fast food.
Yes, you would just say no today. I'm not going to look at social for one whole day, and I'm not going to watch news left or right for one whole day. Could be the greatest thing if people would just get really serious and just say, I'm going to disconnect from the feed, because what it's doing is perpetually reinforcing and a bit brainwashing, because, all the experts talk, again, how the algorithm works. Zuckerberg knows this. Everyone knows it. I think was a couple years ago, but like internal documents on Facebook's study, they know that, I think, something that makes you angry is somewhere like, I'm going to get this fact wrong, but it's like 6 or more times more likely to keep your attention on it. So they know that. So you're constantly being fed anger fuel all day long to keep you looking. So you're going to have it. So if it makes you laugh, it's not as sticky as if it pisses you off. So all of us are being constantly fed things to piss us off. So we'll keep being profitable to social media. So that alone, we've got to stem the amount of ingestion of things that are constantly angering us.
So are you agreeing with Trump that the media is fairly inflammatory?
I don't know if I would. When you made it Trump, I don't agree with how he goes about it. But media.
Obviously,
media on both sides.
Every
absolutely.
news agency has their bent, and the way they write stories, bait you into an ideology, whether they call it, straight news or not. But I think all of us have blocked people. Then social media, you're like, man, I'm not. That's crazy. They're crazy. And I'm just like, I don't want that in my feed. I'm just like, get out of here. And I think the same way, you have to kind of filter what comes across. I was reading in the New York Times that it's a fact, that Russia and China take something like this whole thing with Charlie Kirk and try to spin it. Okay, so in their news media, America and the Russian news media is couched as near a civil war. Okay, that it's not far off, and here's why. And so then they create these, like you saw some of the videos where in Charlie Kirk's thing they said somebody was making signals on the side.
Oh yeah, all that. They made it. It was like a third base coach was giving signals, and this guy was just scratching his shirt.
Like there's a compare, like
he grabbed his hat, and they're like, and they were circling it like there's the signal.
Yeah, so. That no joke. This is what the article said, is that is traceable back to like what do you call it? Warfare. It's like a propaganda from Russia.
Yeah.
It's literally a feed that comes out, not even from our country. So I think that a lot of times all this radicalization is not the core of the way America deals with it. I think they're more mature. I think that they can filter. They may have an opinion, but it's this far edge that gets the violence. So what do you do about that?
Well, I go back to the fact that everyone regulating, again, how much they're ingesting is going to be helpful. Because on the day that I'm not doom scrolling, hate scrolling, I can interact with a human being and have a positive, meaningful interaction. Because coming back to that is what makes societies like the United States of America great, is because at their foundational core, they value discourse, respecting different points of view, saying, how can we work on this and try to get to something we can both be happy with and agree on?
Yeah.
But the way media works, and I'm not saying these things weren't there, but the way media works, and I was just seeing something fascinating about what part of your brain activates when you overly identify with your feed. You are blown away when you have a conversation with someone who it's like they never saw your facts. So here's the deal. They didn't. If all you're getting your news from is social, people are seeing a completely different curated set of facts. I'm putting air quotes out here. And they're not seeing what you're seeing. They're not seeing those things. And so, man, if more than ever before, should we actually sit down and talk to people and compare notes and have meaningful discussions so we could be better informed? The feed and the algorithm is poorly informing us because it only feeds what's going to get the reaction from us.
So here's one of the things I want to be flat on the record about.
Yeah.
Is that I think as Americans or just humans in general, we forget that all of these socials and news companies and all that, they're businesses.
For profits.
They're publicly traded companies.
Yes.
One of my son was on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he's into investment. One of his best performing stocks over the last 2 or 3 years is Meta. Meta does not make money because they care about human flourishing. They care about clicks. They care about clicks because they care about advertising.
Yes.
It's all about dollars. And where I feel like we're way off the grid and people are totally detached is that they listen to whoever their favorite expert is as though that expert gives a rat's ass about them. Mm-hmm. They care about whatever. If you're getting your next contract, that's what you care about. And the company cares about ratings, and they care about ratings because they care about who's getting advertisement. Yep. And you can watch CNN, Fox News, ABC, anybody else. And what's the majority of the commercials that come on? Big Pharma. And of all, you look this up, of all news media, no matter who it is, right, left, whatever you want to call it, 70% of their funding comes from Big Pharma. So the point is that I think we need to wake up to is that none of these people give a shit about us.
No.
None. Yeah. And we don't lean into people in our lives that really care enough about us. I don't need to know all of this information that I'm feeding into myself to be a better human being for the world that I live in. All of that stuff is all it's going to do is get me more fired up in some way, shape, or form, even if it's something as non-harming as the National Geographic cruise. I think that commercial was great, but I went and looked it up. You know what it costs to go on one of those cruises? It's like $15,000. I mean, so, you know, at the least, what that is doing is baiting something in front of people that they can't afford. Like, if you really want to experience a really cool vacation, because it says, why would you want to go somewhere else in the world where everybody else already goes? Well, maybe because that's what I can afford.
Right.
I'm not a lesser person because I can only afford to go to Kentucky Lake, not to the Galapagos Islands on a private National Geographic boat. That doesn't make me less of a human being. So that's my beef right now, that I think there is so much going into this that in the late stage democracy, I don't really have a lot of hope that we get out of the spiral because it's so encompassing in everything.
It is, because the thing with late stage democracy is what made that democracy thrive required a certain kind of responsibility and high character involvement in building it. And then as you inherit it across maybe 3 to 4 generations, it's just not there in the fiber of those people in the late stage. That's why it unravels. They're not maintaining it. They're not doing the work to keep it healthy.
Yeah,
it could be the way that we're fractured and the way that's all set up, that people will almost invite a dictatorship.
Well, that's what happens.
That's exactly what happened with Hitler.
Yes,
exactly.
Populist leaders stand as the avatars to whatever group is going to help them gain power, and they promise to be that representation to whatever that people group is.
Right.
And that's where tyranny becomes possible.
And then tyranny
in late stage democracy.
Right. So now all you've done is exacerbated the problem, because it's going to recur. It's going to fester again, because the one that's unheard is going to come back to retaliate.
Well, okay, so every healthy democracy had a powerful citizenry. In late stage, it's give us a leader who will fix it, because they're not interested in what it's going to take from them to keep their country healthy. You want the leader to solve it because you're tired and you're opulent.
And I like from a business perspective, that almost sounds like the difference in a startup and a very matured business like a GE. And so when you look at a startup, everybody's just like they're in survival mode.
True.
So a lot of this infighting doesn't happen because you all have the same purpose.
Yes.
Like
survive.
The purpose is to survive, right? So you don't have enough time to be like, well, Royce is this. I can't even be in the room with him.
Right.
Like you don't even think about that because you're thinking about Royce's ability to do programming or wherever he's on the team. Yeah. That's all you're thinking about, right?
Yeah.
But when they get into the late stage of business and it's comfortable and you've got your time, you're like, yeah, I don't like that guy. He voted for, whoever, or he believes this, or he goes there, or he drinks Bud Light, So I can't be in a room with him. And I know that's a business example, but it's a microcosm of
good example
of what do we say?
Meta-narrative.
Affluenza.
Yeah, well, I was going to go. Our prosperity and our success ultimately becomes our undoing, often over a couple of generations, but it still does is because we can't instill or maintain the values that made us successful in the first place.
Yeah.
You got to go back to that on some level.
Yeah, and
Americans need to go back to that.
And so a lot of our illnesses, whether it's physical, mental, the way we think through things is all tied. It's illness of affluence. Mm-hmm. It's not an incurable disease.
No.
But it's,
I love it.
It's there because of the affluence that we have, and it gives us permission and freedom to basically become self-destructive.
Right. Well, self-regulating would be discipline. That's a form of self-regulation is discipline. We should remind ourselves what made us great. We should dig into that again instead of, fighting over things that don't need to be fought over, right? And finding a way to dignified discourse is something that we've all got to fight for.
It's interesting, you talk about that Charlie Kirk, went around all these college campuses and I think, you see clips. I didn't know a lot about him until the assassination, actually. Then I binged on a lot of it, but, like watching. And I would say that it was fair-minded discourse. But what happens, the crowd that gathered around got a little more rah-rah and triumphalism and a little more in your face and than he did a little bit of it, but and maybe played into it some. But that was off-putting to me because it's like if it's really discourse and not just another bullhorn, you know what I mean? Then that took away from that. Yeah. But you see the hunger. I'll say that you see the hunger because thousands of students were rallying to that idea because I think they're looking for truth. They're looking for something that cuts through all of the BS and just like tells the truth and something you can depend on. Yeah. Right now.
So you saying that where you were kind of like, like. Somebody makes a point and you're like, yeah, it's like, get him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I liked what he said. I didn't like the crowd response. Yeah. Sometimes I'm saying.
So we didn't talk about this at all. So this may take us way too far out there. So just touch on it for a second. But I wonder how much the spirit of sport and gaming plays into our unconscious because when you're talking something at that high of a level, it's somebody's real life at stake. We're not at a UFC match. Mm-mm. Like, we're not just rallying around our favorite football team or baseball team.
Right.
And if you watch the ESPN 30 for 30 on Auburn versus Alabama, it's troubling for me. Like, seriously, at a heart level, and I'm sorry if you're listening, you're Alabama fan or Auburn fan or whatever. You can unfollow us or send us some hate mail. But the level of disdain that you hear people talk with about somebody just because they root for Auburn or they root for Alabama.
Yeah. And they're from the same state.
Yeah, I'm like,
there's a bigger identity that pulls them together, but they stop at that.
I'm like, I'm all right with a little bit of rivalry talk, like, but to me, that's another way. That's non-political, but that's fanning flames. And we've talked a lot about love. We've talked about human flourishing. To me, that's fanning the wrong flames. Like, it's saying that that's okay. Yeah. Like, nobody's standing up to it and saying that that's not okay. Like, they don't have anybody on there that's like, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well,
it's football. Like, they've got both sides on there, but they don't have that third path or the middle path that's like, this is ridiculous.
And where does that middle path go? So I've listed a couple of things that we could do. Is just like take a break from your feed. Take a break from the 24-hour news cycle. I think that would be incredibly helpful. Number 2, do whatever you can to restore dignified discourse. Do it at home. Just start it at the kitchen table. And then thirdly is what I think you just said is like reach one level higher than where you're stuck categorically. Okay, Auburn, Alabama, University of Alabama, the state of Alabama, the South, right? Just reach one level higher that you're on the same team of.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Blue, red, conservative, liberal, just whatever the names are. American.
Yeah, right.
Just reach one place higher and say, I want to engage you here. We are both Americans. And the highest of all, which I got to go to Jesus here, is that we are children of God.
Yeah.
We're human beings.
Yeah.
And I want to engage you with a level of respect no matter what you are or aren't or say or don't say.
That's it.
Because you are a fellow human being.
I think it's
on
interesting.
the pale blue dot.
Yeah,
in the middle of space,
Yeah.
right? That's a privilege that we get to be here at this time together. So reach up. What's the next category that unites us? Don't get stuck at the one that divides us. Reach up. Find the one that puts us together.
Yeah.
And meet each other there.
Preach on, brother. Preach on.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of preaching, I mean, you went to the Jesus thing, and I think that if you think about the impact of Jesus, he never had an institutional answer. He did not have one. No. He never gave one. He never gave you any clue to anything. He didn't even give his disciples a pattern for how to collaborate among themselves.
He didn't write a letter.
And what it is all back to personal ownership of our responsibility as a human being.
Yeah.
It goes back to a relational thing and a personal thing, not an institutional. And so when we try to bring institutional answers to the convoluted stuff we're dealing with, I don't know that there's ever going to be a perfect, equilibrium or just whatever. I don't know. I think it's always seems to go back to violence and more of the same. Yeah.
Well, we should change it here, and the institution at its best
Right.
should eventually, in several
Form
stages,
follows function.
it will reflect it on some level.
Form
But to go
follows
right
function.
there.
And I think maybe America, that's what America was in the beginning, right? Form following function, like a heart. The heart was in the right place. The content, the writings, all of it said something that was important, resonated in the heart, and then, oh, by the way, let's build a government around it. Now it's kind of flipped.
Yeah. All right. This has been a good one. I think we'll land it with what we're calling each other to do is to love better, love well.
And keep talking.
Yeah. And in another episode, we talked about loving well and suffering well. And suffering doesn't mean there's not love. It's part of the path.
It's usually part of the law.
It's part of the path, and we just want to encourage everybody to see people as a human, no matter if they're on your side of the argument, on the other side of the argument. They voted for Obama or Kamala or Trump or Biden or Bush or whoever. They're still people. You can like University of Alabama or Ohio State. Ohio State fans, just so you know, I'm not a fan. This
Me
guy
either.
right here, Paul
Me
Cook,
either.
is a fan. I think you're a Go Horns.
Hook 'em.
Yeah.
I know it's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I teed that up for you, Paul. I was giving you a little
it hurt.
redemption there.
It hurt.
So, yeah.
I'm just
I know.
Cleaned the floor with him.
Yeah, he did. It was terrible.
Yeah, it's painful to watch.
Go Seahawks.
All right, boys. Well, this has been another episode of the Misfit Social Podcast. Remind you to love and be a misfit. Let's go.